1, 2, 3. If songwriting is king, then production is the castle around it, right? What up? I'm Richard. I make indie music for artists that just want to sound different. Artists that don't want to break into the mold, but also don't necessarily know how, and maybe lack some expertise to get there. Some of that includes like imposter syndrome and just feeling really shitty about yourself when making music, even though it's the thing that you want to do. You know that that's what it is. So I want to make these videos to just kind of help highlight a few tactics that I use, that I've used like along my way of doing music production, and then just how to make your songs just a little bit better. It's going to end up being all completely you without having to compare to all these other artists. So I want to talk about songwriting and production and just as the process in general. So you probably heard the term songwriting is king. So if songwriting is king, then production is the castle. Here's what I mean. So songs are literally just a snapshot of a moment that we can replay over and over. And the cool thing about it is, as an artist, you have context for this song that you've made, but your listeners also have their own sort of context to it. So being able to play both sides of it really allow for your songwriting to kind of expand and mean something greater to more than just you. And it's a cool way to keep this in mind when you're creating in general, because sometimes it can be kind of a dark journey to get to that final creation point, right? So being able to just know that there's multiple perspectives going on is really helpful and intentional when it comes to songwriting and music production in general. I found working as a music producer, but then also just listening to a bunch of different music, that the most effective songs use a specific method to give their songs like a space, their own sort of feeling, and this world where everything there is cohesive and makes sense. Songs can be started in a lot of different ways and a lot of combinations, but in order of importance, here's what I've found to be kind of the most prevalent when it comes to actually writing a song and finishing a song. First and foremost is the underlick, or the hook, the main melody, this main like idea or riff that your song is built behind. It's memorable, but it doesn't take up the entire spotlight either, leaving just enough room for your vocal melody. And melodies, whether they're vocal or this hook, are always what's going to be remembered, even over your lyrics or the meaning of the song itself. It's always going to be the melody that sticks first. But in order for the underlick or the melody to pop, it really needs a good chord progression to be laid down underneath it. Now, this doesn't need to be memorable either. It really just needs to be something that fits the tonality and the attitude of the song. The chord progression itself is going to kind of have its own sort of emotional response. You know, whether it's major or minor, and depending what key it is, this chord progression creates the attitude for the song. It lets the listener just be able to localize what's going on and what to expect. Again, whether it's happy, sad, angry. And obviously, lyrics. But you're probably trying too hard, to be honest. The best lyrics take a memorable melody that goes over top the underlick, and it brings a story to the listener. Obviously, it's literal words that lets them know what's going on. And I feel like this could be a whole separate video of just lyric writing with songwriting and how those two art forms kind of coalesce too. But the important thing is to make sure that your lyrics aren't too detailed. You're not describing necessarily the whole prerequisite of this story. You're literally describing what's going on in this moment so that you can surround this moment with your listener. When I'm working with artists on their songs, I like to let the artist kind of fish with the listener and to let them pick up on clues and cues of what's going on that's either being reinforced by the music or being reinforced by the lyrics that you're actually saying. So if you're running into problems with lyrics and matching up the tonality of your song, try using sensory words or descriptive words of what's going on in actual moments instead of giving this whole detailed macro report of something. Really, the best lyrics in terms of what people remember and what's the most catchy Not saying that your music has to be catchy in order to be effective, but it has to resonate at some level with an audience. But first, it needs to resonate with you. And then the last thing, but it's definitely not unimportant by any means, is the beat. This is actually something that can tie everything together. It's going to be what keeps the listener listening, probably time and time again. It keeps them in a cadence, and a good beat will build off of your chord progression, and it will complement your underlick, and it will even make sense with some of the lyrics sometimes, with just different actions and different pauses and fills that you can make. Your cadence should create a highlight for the underlick. Your cadence should follow along with your chord progression. It needs to match the energy or the vibe of the lyrics. The perfect beat will keep the listener listening, and it will let them internalize all the other elements that are going on. Okay, great. So you have all of these parts, but they still sound like shit. So what the fuck, right? This is kind of the final element of buttoning up a song together. And obviously not every song needs to have this huge drawn out process of music production. Sometimes it's easier and better for the song to keep things more raw, but there's still a process that goes into place. Most times it's not good enough for the parts to just exist. They also need to be polished and sometimes carved in together so that they can fit together. And this is why songwriting is king, but the production elements are the castle. Without this castle, it's a king of not that much. So does every part have its sound carved out to match everything else that's going on? Are you adding effects to some of your tracks and some of your returns in your mixing session to make sure that sonically it all kind of sounds like it's coming from one space? Does it feel kind of just bland and sterile? Or even worse, does it feel like they're all just kind of like jumbled up and mushed together? This is just a little bit of the production elements that need to be cleaned up in order to make all of these parts kind of come through and let each other shine, so that you have this entity that kind of carries on its own sort of energy, its own sort of mojo, right? So whenever I'm working on songs, especially with artists who are bringing in external songs, I try to align all of the songwriting and the music production details so that one message is kind of being simplified and it's recursive between all of these elements, meaning every single part is trying to say its own part of the story, and it's all creating this context for the listener so that you can hear something really cool at the end. So my goal whenever I do make a song for myself or for an artist, my goal is that the song is supposed to create an atmosphere. And it's not just for your listener either, it's for you too. Because if you create this atmosphere and it's something that really resonates with you and it's fundamental about who you are, and you start finding people that where it resonates with them, then you have this kind of organic interaction with people who enjoy your music. And that's something that's really cool and special and not cared for enough, I feel like. So if you invoke your emotions into this whole process and be intentional about it, you're going to start evoking your audience's like emotional response. And an effective song will allow all parties involved, the creators and the listeners, create their own meaning from the song itself. So experiment with all of these different parts, because you'll be able to come up with a bunch of different ways to achieve wildly different results. And it's really cool when you can experiment on different sounds and find something that is uniquely you, uniquely different to you, and it's something that you fundamentally resonate with. That's what's most important, because if you find what resonates with you, then others will be able to find it too. And having a process like this of knowing what to look out for when you're making your song will kind of help make that process easier. And the easier anything is, the better, right? Especially when it involves all of these creative decisions that can kind of go overboard sometimes. If you make something that truly resonates with you, then it's going to resonate with others. All right.